right, welcome back for part two of our discussion tonight. You just heard me go over some of the basic requirements for pulling over-dimensional loads. Really, I call it specialized, but really those requirements were for over-dimensional for the most part. And now I wanted to cover. I've been meaning to, and tonight I wanted to cover some of the things about permits, some of the basic stuff about what to look for on a permit, how to read a permit, when a permit's required. Any load that exceeds those dimensions requires a permit. Now I wanted to cover some stuff. I'm gonna do my best to get a permit to come up on screen while I'm talking about this, so you can actually see what I'm talking about. And I took some. This is critical. This is a critical part of pulling oversized to make sure you know what you're doing. So I took some notes, and so you'll see me looking at my notebook here a little bit, just so I didn't want to leave anything out. I didn't want to forget anything, so I took some notes so I have reference, and I have a permit pulled up right now that I can reference when I'm talking about this. But I'm going to do my best to get that permit to show up on screen while we're talking about this, so you can see what a permit looks like. This particular permit is an Ohio permit. They all pretty much look the same, but there are some differences, but all the basic information is all the same on there. So I'll go ahead and start with how to read a permit, like what you need to look for on the permit, what you need to verify on the permit, and what you need to make sure is correct on a permit. So one of the benefits, I'm sure my friends are going to pick on me right now, but one of the benefits of getting old is you get these fancy little things that help you see better. So I'm going to put my glasses on that not many people see me in, but sort of a requirement for me to see what I wrote on this page. So how to read a permit. The first thing you want to look for, and usually it's at the top of a permit, is you want to look for your company name. Your company name has to be right. You can't be running on some other company's permit, as much as you might like to, because that company paid for it and you didn't. But you need to make sure that the company name on the permit is the company that you operate for. That is very important. One of the first things they look for to make sure the permit matches the company. Second, the next thing down that is I'm going to kind of go in critical list here. The next thing down that's important is the license plate numbers. When you order the permit, or whoever orders your permits for you, whether you do it yourself or you have a service, or in my case, we have a girl in the office that orders all of our permits for us. You need to make sure that the license plate numbers for the tractor and the trailer are both listed on the permit. On most permits, they're there. And you need to make sure that they match your truck and trailer, that they're the correct permits. This is probably the most common error that I find on any permit is license plate numbers. A lot of people will use a template for a permit and they'll drag and drop different license plate numbers in there. So it's an old permit request that they're asking for, and they drag and drop somebody else's permit number by accident in there, or license plate number. So very important. Probably most common error found on a permit is license plates. So check and make sure that your tractor and trailer plate match. If, in my case, if you have more than one trailer plate, because I have a flip axle, my third axle flips up. In the state of Ohio, requires us to have 2 license plates for that. So I have a license plate on my trailer, then I also have a license plate on my flip. So most of the time my flip is down, so I use that license plate number. But I also matters for dimension and also matters for license plate. So I have to make sure that the correct plate number is the one that's that the DOT is going to look at. So again, most common error on a permit. So make sure that that is correct. The next thing you're gonna come down to is the dimensions of the load. Also, number 2, very close to being number 1 as most commonly screwed up part of a permit. Make sure your dimensions are correct. You have got to be, your load, you've heard me talk about it on a couple episodes where I said, that bulldozer out of New York that went to Georgia, as a matter of fact, I said on the episode, I said, you know, we ordered our permit for 11 foot 4 inches. Load was actually 10 foot 6 inches. That is fine. Nothing wrong with that. You're under your required permit. Little bit tricky because your routing will change based on your dimension. So, especially in the summer when there's a lot of construction going on. So you kind of want that to be as close and accurate as possible so you don't hurt yourself with your routing. But as long as you are under what your permit says, equal to or under what your permit is for, then you're fine. You can be under it, and that's fine. So, also, number 2, critically important, for sure, is checking the dimensions of the load. That, I promise you, a roadside DOT inspector or a scale master, when they pull you in to check your permit, if they want to look hard enough, that's the number 1 thing they're going to walk right out and start measuring and make sure that it matches what your permit says. Routing. The next thing down you're going to come to is your overall dimensions. On this particular permit with Ohio, it's going to list your license plate numbers, and the very next thing down from that is your overall dimensions. It gives load dimensions and then overall dimensions, and you want to make sure load dimensions aren't as critical for being correct. If your load's 24 foot long and your permit says it's 22 foot long, nobody's going to bother you about that. But if your load is 11 foot wide and your permit says 10.6, they're going to bother you about that. So, not quite, the load dimensions not quite as critical as the overall dimensions that you see on a permit. So, the very next line down, after you see your overall dimensions, that is going to be axle weights if you're heavy, like I am sometimes. Axle weights will be listed, and you need to make sure Ohio is one that is huge on this. You need to make sure that your axle weights are correct on your permit based on what you're trying. What I do for Ohio permits, because this is one that this is the area they focus on pretty hard. What I do is I don't even order the Ohio permit until I get to a truck stop and get a scale. Once I got a scale ticket and I see how much the weights are, I send that to my permit department. They order my permit based on that scale ticket, so it cannot be wrong. So again, pretty important. Make sure that those axle weights match, or you're at least under the axle weights that your permit says. The catch to that, I'm sure you're like me. I'm sure you're sitting there thinking in your head right now, well, I'll just max it out. I'll just max out every permit, and then I don't have to worry about it. I'll be under it all the time. And you're absolutely right. 100% right. You would absolutely be under it. However, there are a lot of states that the fee for ordering your permit is based on weight. They call it per ton. So if you hear me reference a per ton state, that's what I'm talking about. Tennessee is one, and holy smokes, Tennessee can be brutal on their permits. They have a lot of benefit to them. They allow you to run at night. They don't. Their scale systems are kind of nice. You just pull in, you go in and show them your permit. You don't even cross the scale. So there's a lot of benefits to Tennessee, but they charge you for those benefits, and they charge that by per ton. So you, if you just max out every single Tennessee permit, get ready to pay $400 every time you order a permit in Tennessee. So you're not going to want to necessarily max out that permit every time. Ohio, you can max out every time. Doesn't matter. It's the same fee. It's $145 regardless. So that's fine. You can max out Ohio and get away with that. Other states, you want to get a list of per ton states, you're going to want to not necessarily just max that permit out, because it's going to cost you a lot of money that you didn't need to pay. So keep that in mind. After the axle weights, the next line down on the Ohio permit and most permits is going to be the routing. Also critically important. If you're crossing multiple states with a permit, like I am on this load, I'm coming from Iowa going to Maryland. I'm crossing 5, 6 states. I don't know how many, 6 I think. You need to verify that that permit, the entry and exit point for each state match. If Indiana says you're going out on Route 70 and Ohio says you're coming in on Route 30, you can't do that. So you need to make sure that the routing makes sense and the entry and exit points match for the next permit in line. Critically important. They'll definitely, especially since most states have scales at entry and exit. So you're most likely going to find a scale for a state right when you cross into the state line on any major interstate. So the scale is going to be right there, and if you're on the wrong road, that is a permit violation. And they're absolutely going to bring that up because you're not supposed to be there according to their permit. So also with routing, kind of want to familiarize yourself with the routing that's on there and kind of get a feel for it. A lot of times, like for me, I run a lot of the same areas, so I kind of know the roads for the most part, but every now and then they'll throw me a curveball that I've never been on that road, so I don't know. So I got to look it up and see. And we're going to talk about that in a minute too. I'll look it up and see where it's at. So checking your routing, make sure it matches with the states before and after it. And familiarize yourself with the route that's on there. Make sure you understand where you're supposed to go. High loads is really, weight and high loads is really where that routing comes in very, 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 very crucial. You definitely don't want to be off route with a high load. The chance of you hitting an obstruction or running yourself into a situation where you could possibly hit an obstruction with a high load is way higher than, say, a wide load. So definitely, if you're on a high load, you want to pay very specific attention to that routing and make sure you don't miss an exit and know where you're going, because the very next bridge could be one that you can't get under. So that's critically important. Again, 1, 2, and 3 probably, I would think. In the top corner, this one, you know what? I guess I shouldn't be listing these things as critically important because they're all just as important. This one especially, the valid dates of the permit. I can't count how many times I have run into a situation where I had a permit that was no longer valid. Maybe I took the load home for a weekend and didn't even realize that Monday morning when I got out, my permit's no longer valid because it expired on Saturday or maybe Sunday. So check the valid dates of your permit, make sure that the start date and finish date are within the guidelines or within the scope of how you can get that load through that state. A permit violation. If you're caught and your permit's not valid for the day that you're running, maybe it was valid yesterday, maybe it was valid tomorrow, permit violation. They're going to take your permit from you, make you order a whole new permit, and they're going to write you a permit violation on a form. So take a second, check your valid dates, make sure they're good. Very, very important. Critically important, just like everything else. Provision sheets, I talked about that in the tools that we need for oversized. Provision sheets are incredibly important. Ohio requires your OS1A to be with it. Pennsylvania has some goofy map thing that they give you that they require that map to accompany their permit as well. So familiarize yourself with what states require the provision sheets to be with it and make sure you get those provision sheets. Read over those provision sheets too, because there's some stuff that you'll learn a lot from those provision sheets that I certainly can't teach you in one video. Probably not in the life of this channel. I'm probably not going to teach you all the information that's on these provision sheets. So read over them real quick the first time you get them. I reference those things a lot when I'm trying to figure something out. So definitely good to have. I discussed it in the last video on the first part of this video on where to find that information, so I don't really need to cover that again. I think you got a pretty good idea where to find it. It's in the books or online. That's incredibly important. In those provision sheets and in the books, you're going to find when you're required to have an escort, when you're not required to have an escort, whether you're allowed to travel at night. Your permit will also probably say that, whether you're allowed to travel at night or not. So good things to have. The books are good things to have. Provision sheets, if they're not a requirement, they're absolutely still a good thing to have and read through. Something I wanted to cover doesn't really have a whole lot to do with permits. Anyway, that information that I just gave you, that's basically all there is to a permit. Basically all you got to look for. Valid dates, license plate numbers, company name, dimensions, and routing is pretty much it. Then you want to kind of look over it real quick and make sure your travel times. And I learned something Mississippi a couple weeks ago. I didn't know Mississippi will let you run up to 10 foot wide. They'll let you run 24/7. I didn't know that. I just happened to look at my permit and I was like, oh, look at that, I'm allowed to run tonight. So it allowed me to advance that load 3 hours further than what I would have, because I took a second to read the permit. So something that doesn't really have anything to do with reading a permit exactly, but I wanted to cover with you is what to expect on scales. This is something that a lot of people don't know. I've actually seen it. I've actually seen a guy rolling up to a scale, his pre-pass blinks green, and he rolls on by, pulling over dimensional load. You are not allowed to do that. You're not. When you're under a permitted load, sign and flag, any permitted load, when you're under that load, regardless of what your transponder, if you have pre-pass in your truck, regardless of what your transponder tells you to do, you have to go into the scale. If that scale is open, you have to pull into the scale. And you're subject to inspection. Most of the time, they don't really bother us much. I mean, everybody's got this big fear going into scales oversized because there's so much for them to look at. And that's true. I mean, there's more for them to look at with an overdimensional load. But they really don't pick on us a whole lot. They do ask to see the permit. They want to know that you have a permit and it's valid for the days that you're traveling and you're on route and your dimensions are correct. They want to know that. So, you have a permit. Okay, here's my permit. So, just so you know, with the scale in Ohio, regardless of your pre-pass transfer, if that scale is open, whether you have a pre-pass or not, if the scale is open, you have got to go in. You have to enter that scale. If you pass by that scale, number one, it's a permit violation, but number two is they're probably coming after you. So it happened to me, and I'll explain that in a minute. So that's basically that's the very nitty-gritty basics of reading a permit. And like I said earlier, I'll try to do my best to get this permit to come up on screen so you can see these specific things I'm talking about throughout this video. I did mention that I said it happened to me where I passed the scale. Real quick story for you. Give you a little example of what can happen. In Georgia is kind of unclear, I'll use, as what you need to do. If you've never been to a scale in Georgia and you're overdimensional, you're rolling up on that scale. They have most of their scales have the big signs outside that say truck bypass scale or truck must enter scale. There is no sign that says open or closed. There isn't. There isn't a sign that says, hey, the scale's open or the scale is not open. They just have those big signs as soon as you cross over their sensors, whatever it might be. I don't know if it's video or if it's plated in the road, but you cross over their sensors and it says truck bypass way station or truck must enter way station. So I'm rolling up 75 north of Atlanta, and I come across the scale. I hit their plates. Thing pops up and says truck bypass way station. Am I allowed to bypass way station? Are they open? Because if they're open, I got to go in. There's no sign there that says overdimensional must enter way station. No sign, no anything. So last second, I'm like, you know what? I don't know if anybody's in there or not, but I'm going in. So I go in. Then there's it Y's off, goes in front and behind us. There's two scales, one in front of the building, one behind the building. And it says overdimensional loads go to rear of building. So I go to the rear of the building. There's a big sign there that says, when you pull onto the scale, there's a big sign that says, if light remains green, proceed to I-75. So I pull up on the scale, I look inside, I don't see anybody, nobody's waving at me, nobody's motioning, nobody's anything. So I proceed to I-75. And as I'm pulling out, I look in my rearview mirror, and here he comes. Like, I didn't even get off the ramp for the scale. I didn't even get up the exit ramp or the entrance ramp from the scale before he had me pulled over. He came up to the truck. He said, you know, what are you doing, driver? You know you're supposed to bring your permit inside. And I very politely said, how do I know that? That, you know, this was actually pulling into your scale. I was confused on what I was supposed to do because there's no real indication. And he was like, you know what? I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. So he said, your best bet is to just come in, no matter what. So there you go. There's a lesson for you. In Georgia, whether you think that scale's open or not, go in. And if they're open or someone is there, make sure you stop and take your permit inside because they want to see it. They want you to bring, it's just like Tennessee. Tennessee has you go around back and park and bring your permit inside. Georgia wants the same thing. They want you to bring your permit in. So there's your lesson out of my little story. Final result of that little screw up on my part was, he said, while I got you here, I'll just go ahead and give you an inspection. I said, that's fine, go ahead. And he did, and I got a clean inspection. So I went into the scale, did something wrong, got pulled over, and ended up with a clean inspection out of it. So do the right thing, or at least try to do the right thing. And these guys aren't out to ruin anybody's career. They aren't out to just be mean or write violations just to write violations. So 9 times out of 10, if you just try to do the right thing, or you are doing the right thing, then they're pretty understanding about it, and they're going to help you out. So that's all I got on permits for now. I am going to talk about it through the episodes with different loads that I have. I'll talk about permits, probably talk a little bit about it tomorrow with this load, because this is a wide, high, and heavy load. So we probably will discuss permits in the video that I'm making tomorrow. But I hope this helped you. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. I'll do my best to answer them. If I can't answer them or I don't know the answer, I'll darn sure do my best to find the information for you. Maybe there's something I misspoke or something that I didn't cover that you as a subscriber or a watcher right now thinks might be important. Feel free, man. Comment below. Like I'm all about having people comment. I'm all about learning. So maybe you know something I don't, and that would help me as well. So I encourage it, and I hope you know if you have a question or you have a comment, feel free to comment below. I look forward to hearing from everybody, and I'll do my best to get you the most accurate information as quickly as possible. I hope everybody has a good night.